Okay, hey sketchy friends. So today I have a special guest with me, and if any of you have watched my channel much at all, you know that I never really do this, but I'm a huge fan of Oliver Hoeller's, and he's just brought out a book, which is going to be backwards to you right now, but we're going to show it to you in all of its glory in a minute. And I thought it was just a really good opportunity to have a chat with Oliver and just sort of have a look at Oliver's book, but also give you guys some really awesome tips from the man himself. So thank you very much for joining me today, Oliver. Really appreciate you giving up a few minutes of your time.
Thank you, Taria. Always nice to chat with you and hang out with you, and I'm happy to be on.
Yeah, so it was really nice to actually meet you in person in Auckland last year, actually. I was
Hmm.
very nervous approaching you. I was like, ooh, because like I've heard of you or, seen you on YouTube and stuff like that and Instagram. So it's always very nerve-wracking, like actually approaching people in the real world and like saying hello and stuff. But it was really nice. I watched your demo and we had a good chat and stuff. So it's always nice when you meet someone in person and then your interactions from there onwards are much easier.
Yeah,
So yeah, so it's really cool. And then
it turns out
obviously
that
you invited me to be on the holiday summit that you did at Christmas, which was super awesome. And it was really nice to watch the interviews that you did with various people like Gabby Campanario and James Richards, who I'm a huge fan of, and well, and
mm,
Renata, everyone that you had on that lineup was really cool.
yeah, it's always fun to connect and get to know the people who you're a fan of, who you know from the internet or who you know from YouTube and Instagram, and discover the real people behind it. So just like
Yeah,
yeah, it's all
that's
real
very
people in the end.
It's very cool. I feel like, especially with urban sketching, we're all very connected on the internet. So it's very nice to actually meet people in person. Just a quick introduction. I'm sure probably a lot of people watching this already know who you are anyway, but just an introduction to who you are, where you're based, and maybe you could tell us a little bit how you came to discover urban sketching.
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently based back in Vienna, so that I had left in Austria, that I had left about 20 years ago when I embarked on my journey as a scientist, as it was at the time, which brought me to the UK and to San Francisco. And at some stage during that time in San Francisco, I decided I needed to sort of I needed a new hobby, something that I hadn't done for a long time. I hadn't been drawing for a long time. That was about 15 years ago. I had enjoyed that when I was a teenager, up to when I was about a teenager, but then it had fallen by the wayside. And then somehow with this urban sketching movement and this hype, it sort of caught on with me and sparked my interest. And as most people do, bought a pen and a sketch pad and went out and see what it was all about. And I sort of got hooked in it. Um, I really love the aspect of going out and sketching what you find, the sense of discovery,
Mm.
the sense of storytelling, literally storytelling, like sneaking up on things and sort of finding out what's going on. And yeah, it turns everything that's otherwise very mundane into an adventure. I really like that. And so things progressed from there, one step after another. I moved more and more into the art world as an illustrator for scientists, and now more and more to teach in the context of urban sketching as well. So that's that's me in a nutshell, I guess.
For my own personal curiosity, like
Yeah,
when you got into the sort of teaching side of things, I mean,
yeah.
how did you start that? Did you like dipping your toe into the water of teaching?
When I was still in science, I was sort of involved with teaching in that realm as well. So I had a bit of an understanding of what it looks like when people don't get a thing, what they look like. So, but I hadn't taught in the context of sketching, obviously, of art. And I was sort of invited to try that in the context of that 10 by 10 series of workshops that happened a few years ago.
Yeah.
Someone, my friend Susan, now a friend Susan, that she knew about me from the internet, and she was involved with the people putting that together, and she asked me what I wanted to teach in that context, and I thought, well, okay, let's do that. Let's give it a shot. And I liked it. I like the change of pace that it gives. I like the sketching as a solitary activity where I'm all me and sort of sneaking up on things and sketching and being in the flow. I like the illustration work where you have a deadline and you sort of solve a challenge of sorts. And then the teaching aspect, which is more outgoing and it's more interactive and sort of people focused. So it's a nice combination for me.
I never thought of it that way, but those three aspects
Yeah.
of it, they actually do complement each other really well. Sort
When
of
one takes over too much, I can feel that I'm getting a little bit antsy
out
and
of
perhaps
balance.
unhappy
Yeah.
at times. So
And so what led you to producing this awesome book? I'm sure this was a hell of a lot of work because I've been through the process myself recently. So yeah, what made you feel like you wanted to produce this book?
I feel when I go and teach, one of the key questions that I get, it's not one question, but it's sort of one universe of questions, and that deals with people are feeling that they're not terribly happy about the sketches. It's not about it's not people who have never sketched, but people who have sketched a bit and sort of hit the wall and are not happy with their sketches because they're not as, I don't know, not as energetic or don't bring them as much joy. Someone once pointed out, look, I've done that. I've sketched the house. I've put everything in, but it does not radiate any joy. What do I need to do? And I feel like this is really what I like to focus on in workshops, like how to push reality and how to see things and how to accentuate certain things so that you are having a good time while you're doing it. It's not about, so I'm thinking about it a lot about it as a toolbox where you can pull out certain tools that help you to achieve certain things. And so I thought it would be an interesting or perhaps helpful thing to share that toolbox and that way of thinking and approaching things for people who find they might need a little bit of extra joy in the sketches.
Yeah, I really like that. It's like, yeah, just being able to take your sketches to the next level and like add in that personality and like the
Yeah, how
yeah,
to think about that and where does it come from and what
yeah,
are angles that you can push
yeah,
to make that happen, to
yeah,
make it your sketch, not just
that's
a,
so difficult to learn, like when you're or to find out that next step when you're starting out. It's like, okay, yeah, perspective and this and that, but it's
yeah,
like, yeah, taking it all to like how do I put personality into it and like how do I put character into it and that kind of thing. So
yeah,
yeah, that
yeah.
makes sense to me.
And some
Yeah.
things are a little bit harder and some things are actually pretty easy. You just need to think about it and keep it in
Mm.
mind.
Okay, so I feel like we can pull out some few little nuggets of wisdom. Well, there's many nuggets of wisdom
Few
in this,
little
but we're
nuggets.
gonna try and extract 5 main nuggets of wisdom from this beautiful book. So I've got your camera on your book showing right now. I hope I'm doing this right. Oliver actually had to give me a lesson on how to use Zoom just before we started recording this. But yeah, so we're gonna do our best to pull out just 5 little nuggets of wisdom from this book. So
In the keeping with the idea of how to make your sketch more joyful and make it more meaningful and make it say something, one the most essential tip almost is irrespective of the drawing process, irrespective of how you draw, and it deals with keep in mind or form an opinion of why are you sketching what you're sketching.
mhm,
Now that sounds trivial, but a lot of the things that go wrong because if you don't form an opinion or if you don't take a stance or if you don't narrow down of what you're interested in, it can fade away in the process. You know, you sit down, you draw the first thing, and then your mind wanders off, and you see another thing over there, and you put that in, and there's another thing and another thing, and suddenly you have 10 things in there that have nothing to do with each other, and it can easily your sketch can easily fall apart or be about nothing. I think about it in that way of asking yourself first, why are you sketching something? It could be because you're interested in the play of colors, or you're interested in that particular person, or you're interested in that balcony, or whatever it is. But if you have identified that and even verbalized that for yourself, you stand a fighting chance of actually having your sketch be about it. So once you identify why you're sketching something, then you can ask yourself what needs to be in there to say that. So if you're interested in that balcony, what needs to be in there is the balcony, okay? Not the 10 other cars next to it and the other stuff that might also be in there. But without the balcony, it's not going to be about the balcony. And only then it becomes about how you actually deal with all the drawing and the painting and the other skills that you use to sketch that. When I do a workshop or something and I go around and ask people, why are you sketching this? One thing that no one's ever allowed to say is, I don't know. Anything goes, but I don't know is not an acceptable
That's a
answer.
good rule. I like that. I like that. So moving on to your tip number 2, which I always like this one because I feel like I do bang on about time a lot as well. So
Yeah.
when you're short on time, a strategy to deal with that is like growing a scene.
So if you have identified what's the important stuff and you put that in the scene, then you have already you have a strong foundation. And then the other stuff around it, you can think about growing that scene out from one element out to other elements and refine it and develop it further and further. I like to do it for a number of reasons. One is that it helps you with keep in mind what's important. You start with that. The other thing is it helps to keep the time pressure away because as you grow it, you're always ready. It's just more and more stuff, but the important stuff is there. And so it also takes off the pressure of now I have to do this big masterpiece that I'm sure it's going to take 3 hours. So you can start with limited time, and if you have more time, you grow it further.
So that feeds on really nicely from the first tip, really, is just starting like with the main thing that you want to draw because of whatever your reason is for drawing it. And then as you have more time, you kind of grow outwards. Would you keep your composition in mind then? In like maybe you would start with the thing you want to draw. I mean, do you keep something like rule of thirds in mind and then grow your scene out from that point? Or
one thing that I keep in mind when I do that is to sort of generate an interesting overall silhouette. There's lots of stuff to talk about, but we'll just jump around a little bit to make a few points. If you look at those elements, they together form that sort of silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
And even just at that silhouette level, you can recognize things and they look interesting and they communicate what it's about. Now, if that statue was much smaller and I had sort of put it here, then in the silhouette level, you wouldn't be able to discern it. So an interesting silhouette that is sort of pokey and reads by itself is a good thing to aim for if you do that sort of strategy.
Okay.
Especially also if you, for example, go for people sketching. Here's an increasing the silhouette gets increasingly more interesting, and so also the people get increasingly more interesting. So this is a very, very solid, solemn stance. Everything's sort of tucked in, very, very stable. But as soon as some of the appendages, the arms and the legs get spread out and moved, the people get more interesting, and stability gets reduced a little bit, but there's more action going on. It's all in the silhouette already. So strong silhouettes are sort of spiky, protruding silhouettes, and they make usually for more interesting images. You can also see here silhouettes where just at that level you can already tell what's going on.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like on the right hand side there, the figure holding his arm and his leg up. It's like there's not any drawn detail there. But you can still get so much story just from the silhouette, as you're saying.
So that's another, maybe it sounds like if you draw people and you want to improve your people drawing skills, don't draw people that sort of completely stiff and from the side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is probably the most boring silhouette of all, and it's really hard to make that. Even if you have great people drawing skills, it's really hard to make this interesting. But as soon as there's something happening, as soon as arms or legs or something is a little bit stretched out, you'll have a much easier time.
Okay, sorry. I completely knocked us off track there by accident. But let's go to creating focus.
Focus,
And
yeah.
yeah,
I think focus is important. You may or may not want to have a focus in your image, but what you definitely do not want is a focus somewhere where you don't want it to be.
mm-hmm.
So you've drawn your amazing scenery, and then there's a dark trash can somewhere, and suddenly you make this really dark, and you never intended it to be about this trash can, but because there's a big contrast in value between the dark trash can and perhaps the sky, now everyone's looking at the trash can. So if you know how to control how to set the focus with contrast, value contrast, the amount of dark and light, you can use it to set the focus where you want it to be, or you can avoid setting a focus somewhere where you really don't want it to be. Okay, and it's sort of it's something that we cannot avoid. We are sort of wired to recognize the biggest difference between light and dark and focus our attention on that. So we can see here on the left side that as we move down, the contrast between the square, between the circle and the square increases from here to here. And so we are more likely to look at those two than at those on the top. So the biggest contrast would be here, for example, where a white car is in front of a black house, or a black square in front of the white background, and we will always look at that area. Okay.
And it's such an easy mistake to make,
Yeah,
is just to go in, yeah, with some heavy, darker colors, and until someone really kind of says that, like you've put in the book, and like you're saying right now, like having your darkest darks next to your lightest lights, for example,
yeah,
the white of the page and this deep dark shadow, like that is where the focus is going to go. And it's just something you don't really think about until someone kind of explains that to you or points that out.
yeah. Now the trick is, and this is the hard part, I know everyone, this is easy to understand, and it's also relatively easy to do. The tricky part is that when you're out sketching, your environment is not set up to provide you with the focus that you want.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's, the environment is a mess, and it just is what it is. It's not there to look pretty in your sketch. So you need to deviate from what reality is and not be a slave to what exactly you see value-wise, how dark certain things are or how light certain things are, in order to say what you want to say. And this is the hard part. It's not so much it's a little bit the doing, watercolor. It can be tricky as well to sort of you get into the blue paint and suddenly everything's very dark. But it's really sort of making a conscious decision to deviate from what you see and making it less contrasty in order not to have it be a focus. That's especially difficult as we are drawn to look at those contrasty areas. So we don't want to put them as contrasty, but we always look at them because we're attracted to them. So that's the tricky part.
I think that's the real line between, yeah, coming out of the beginner stage and going more into kind of an intermediate like ability, is like being able to deviate from reality, and like
Yeah,
how to do that. So
yeah.
this
And
being one way.
exactly. And what this thinking behind is and why to do it in what way. I think this is sort of what I'm trying to talk about here. And I think this is also, yeah, as you say, this is sort of where the next step is usually.
Hmm.
Um, and it's good fun. So you
Yeah,
can start to play with that and see what happens.
yeah, absolutely. And then moving on to your next tip about keeping colors related to keep the
Colors.
harmony.
I think color is another biggie for most people. I mean, it's definitely a scary area for me, and sort of how to control it and how to make it appealing and in a way that I enjoy.
I remember you saying that in your demo in Auckland, actually, that you said something about color was always your kind of nemesis, or it took you you struggled with it like more. You kind of said something along those lines, and I was really surprised because I guess obviously like now you've kind of got over that, but I was just like, I just love the way that you use color. So it was like interesting to hear you say that actually.
Yeah, it is because I think we also all have our own sensibilities and what
Mm.
we want it to look like. And if it gets it can easily get very fruit salady, and I not the biggest fan of that. And yet I do want color in it as well. So how do you make a colorful image without it turning into a fruit salad is always a little bit of a challenge. Usually color is all about restricting the area of the color wheel that you use for harmony. And you can do it in all sorts of ways, but one way is to sort of keep your colors related. So keep them related on the color wheel next to each other,
Hmm.
analogous colors. And they have something in common. They are sort of have all a certain degree of red, for example, here in common, even if they go more towards violet, or even if they go a little bit more towards the purple. Now, that analogous color scheme can help a lot with keeping things harmonious. And then by using one color that's sort of further away, or perhaps even opposite, depending on what you want, what you like, this sort of can give this extra little splash of color, this little bit extra attention to keep it from getting too boring. So keeping them together for harmony and then perhaps adding one separate color that sort of spices things up a little bit can
Yeah.
be a good way to go. So there's a few examples of that. So you can then also sort of shift color schemes altogether and go into sort of more crazy territory,
Mhm.
deviate from reality a little bit more, which is
Yeah.
something that I quite enjoy. A lot of
Yeah. Very
times
cool.
reality doesn't have enough oomph.
I agree. I agree. So, and I guess
Um,
like, yeah, keeping this in mind does help people understand how they might be able to apply more expressive colors to their sketches rather than actually painting like the various like tones of brown and gray and stuff that we see in the urban scenes in real life. Following this kind
yeah,
of idea can help you paint things purple and green that aren't necessarily purple and green in real life.
yeah, and even if you go with the grays, the sort of more realistic colors that you
Mhm.
see in life, you
Mhm.
can then sort of have that as the sort of common ground, and then go with a few punches of colors to make it more interesting if you wanted to.
Yeah,
So then the harmonious part would be the gray, and then if you sort of turn up saturation for some of those aspects a little bit more, it would become even more exciting because it's not everywhere, but it's
yeah.
connected by that grayness. So it's another way of keeping the colors connected.
I have a question. You
Yes,
said you
please.
were like a scientific illustrator, but then I look at your sketches and they're just so fun and like super almost caricature-y and like comic
Mm,
booky and stuff like that. And I can imagine as a scientific illustrator, you had to be like quite precise and
yeah, I never did that kind of scientific
oh,
illustration, that sort of
okay.
precise. And I found that, I don't know, I guess I'm a black sheep, I don't know, but I've always found that not very appealing to sort of relay precise information. I sometimes I do teach workshops about the principles of visual communication for
Yeah.
scientists that tell them about what works, like colors and value contrast and things just like here.
Hmm.
But when I do work for scientists, I usually what I do is I take the work that they've done and then come up with an image that sort of transposes that into a different world that's easily approachable. So think about a fable,
Hmm.
which sort of tells a deeper truth by putting it into into a world with animal characters.
Yeah.
So I'm taking that, and sort of my images are usually something that draw people in, not to explain explicitly what it
Yeah.
is all about, although it will be true on some level. And so if you know more about that, then it will be more interesting for you. But if you don't know a lot about it, it will still be interesting enough that it becomes a memorable piece and that people will get sucked into and explore more about that work or that particular lab. That's
Ah.
sort of what I did
Okay,
most of the
because when I
time.
hear scientific illustrator, I'm thinking like,
Yeah,
illustrating human
yeah,
bones on a textbook page or something. Oh, okay.
yeah, no.
Okay, that sounds super fun.
Yeah,
Really
so it's more like being able to understand what they're doing and then getting to the gist of it and telling the story in a visual way that sort of
in a fun
speaks
kind
to
of.
a larger audience. That's
Yeah.
sort of what I did, and things
Okay.
around that universe, or for posters where it's just about a
Yeah.
caricature image of, I don't know, Darwin or something. That's sort of also what I like.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. That's cool. I think I might have actually liked science if I'd actually had some of your illustrations to look at. So who knows?
Yeah.
And my favorite part of this book, just because, is the expressive people sketching section, because I just love your people sketching so much, and the drawings are really fun with the speech bubbles and stuff like that. I saw one of your more recent posts on Instagram, as at the time we're recording this, about
Hmm.
I think it was two women talking about doing 10,000 steps a day. And they were like, okay, maybe let's just walk to the car. And then you're like, oh, let's get a sausage on the way. It just made me laugh. Is that something you actually overheard, or was that just a figment of your imagination?
Well, I'm trying to stay true to reality, but I
Yeah,
might condense it and take bits and pieces. So the people that I've drawn might not have been the ones that said that, but they might have been. So that
yeah,
sort of thing.
yeah,
So I'm going with the storytelling mind into my sketches and figuring out like where could there be something. So I don't. It's like a prompt outside. Like, I go and experience what's going on, and I wouldn't have come up with that by myself. It wouldn't have been possible. I wouldn't have thought about this.
yeah.
But then by being immersed in that environment and condensing the things that are happening, I try to take this and put that into a little story. I'm
Little
interested
story.
in that story aspect, and it's sort of yeah. I think you have to do something that entertains you when you make your sketches.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's maybe another little bonus tip. Don't draw stuff that you don't want to draw.
It has to be fun for, yeah.
Just because people draw it doesn't mean that you need to draw it. Draw
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you're excited about drawing.
That's a really good point, that you don't always have to go for the most obvious or like postcardy kind of view of things. And that actually, if you are interested in a dirty cup of coffee and a weird pot plant and a traffic light in the background, then do it. That's um
Absolutely.
also
Absolutely.
valid.
I mean, we're so overloaded with images so that we can be easy to revert back to what we have seen before. So we've seen all these amazing houses. So you might feel like, oh, this is what sketching is about. You
Mm,
draw houses.
mm,
And it can be if you want to, but if you feel like you have to draw houses because this is what sketching is about, then it's
yeah.
worth shedding that and draw whatever you feel floats your boat.
Feel drawn to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to keep you
Yeah,
much longer, Oliver, but I do just want to ask you another question.
absolutely.
Where did your people sketching kind of prowess come from? Like, I think I've heard you say maybe before that you really liked comic books and stuff, and like, is that where, or
I
maybe
do
I'm
like comic books, but
mistaken.
drawing people can be as hard as you make it. So it's a sort of thing that you are the judge of what you want your people to look like. And if they can be from stick figures to simple dashes in the background or to very, very rendered beasts.
Mhm.
So first of all, realize that it's you. You're making your life as hard as you want it to be, or as hard as you can manage. I don't know, or harder than you can manage, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's you. It's no one else who tells you what your people need to look like. Now, having said that, it didn't really help me because I wanted them to look a certain way. I wanted a lot of detail, but I also want to do it outside, and I want to not draw just random people. I want them to look like exactly that person, sort of thing,
Hmm.
ideally. And because I feel like this is just what I'm most interested in, the character and that sort of thing. And it honestly it takes a while, but I think there's a framework that I present how to think about it, but it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that it's a quick thing, to be honest. It's a lot of doing, and they will just grow. Your proneness will just grow. You can think about it in a number of different ways. Do you look at the outline, the contour lines? And then you can sort of supplement that with your understanding of what people are made of. Like once you realize that there's a front plane, for example, to the face and a side plane, you have a fairer chance of capturing that and putting that in and realizing that if the light comes from one direction and the other side will be in shadow.
Yeah.
This only comes once you realize that your head is perhaps something like an egg or a box rather than a flat thing. So, the things that you learn on top, and as your understanding increases, then your ability to see things increases. And as you draw more people, then also your muscle memory of recognizing similar things and having your hand follow what you see more closely also increases. My biggest tip would be to draw on loose sheets and then throw them away, because it takes initially quite a few sketches of people until you get somewhere that you may like. And if you're too precious about your sketchbook and you feel like now the perfect person has to get in there, then you're missing out on the learning opportunity and the mileage of putting the pen to paper. So I have a whole stack of paper that are just random paper that I have on the floor where I do random sketches and outside of my sketchbook, just because whenever I do something, I sketch a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes they might turn into something, sometimes not. A lot of them go into the bin. So it's a lot about doing. And to be honest, I mean, for me, it was a big appeal. I got into sketching because I wanted to draw people. So that's sort of what kept me going, I guess.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Oliver. In true fashion, I was like, yeah, we're going to keep this video really short. And then it's like, I could just talk to you all afternoon, which would be fun. But where can people buy this awesome book, which I'm going to...
well, maybe you can put a link in there. On my website, there's a way of ordering that, and you can get it straight from there. You can also sign up for my little newsletter if you want to stay in touch. I share things that are what's going on, what's happening, workshop opportunities and other things on there. I find that that's the best way of staying in touch, because all the other social medias, you may or may not see things, and I get a little frustrated by that. And I feel like with email, I know you have you get the email, it might end in spam, but I always like to have a conversation with people as well. Sometimes they send me things back and ask me about this or that. I feel like it's a very human thing.
Yes.
Whereas Instagram and these things are nice to share things a little bit, but you never know who's there, whether they're there. Will they ever be there again? Will someone see things ever again?
Yeah,
Will I see those people ever again?
It's so true. Email is better.
So usually I give, whenever there's something worthy of having or announcing or sharing, this is where I'll do it first. So like for a symposium, I think the handout for anyone who can't go there, things like that will all be shared with people on the newsletter.
Oh, that's really nice. That's cool. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Oliver. I am looking forward to seeing you again in person in October in Buenos Aires. It will be really, really cool. If we can have a beer.
Absolutely. And draw some people.
Yeah, and draw some people. The last thing I want to mention, actually, sorry, is I absolutely love the dedication in this book. Again, it made me laugh. The book you dedicate to your wife and your son, who continue to patiently disagree when I visit my valley of despair and tell them that I can't draw. I can't relate to that more than those words. So I really enjoyed that dedication.
Yeah, it's a very personal struggle, and so sometimes we just in that valley of despair. I'll talk about that in the book as well. So
okay. Just we all visit that valley of despair on a regular basis, so it's good to know.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thanks so much, Oliver, for sparing the time to chat with me, and for sharing your wonderful book. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Taria.